Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the Bible is enough for unity thing, and just following the Bible, saying let's follow the Bible. If only all Christians follow the Bible, that will not achieve unity. Most Christians do go with what the Bible says. All Christians, to some extent, base their teachings on the Bible, and most Christians try to follow the Bible very closely. And we don't have anything like unity. And the reason for that is quite simply that there are different ways of reading the Bible. There are different ways of reading different parts of the Bible. Even you, when you read different parts of the Bible, you read them differently. You wouldn't read a historical book like Acts the same way you would read poetry in Song of Solomon, for example. And if we went to theological college, which I haven't, you would find out that the word for this is hermeneutic. The hermeneutic is the particular way you interpret a text. It's part of exegesis, which is another fancy word, which means to bring out the meaning of the text. Basically, what I'm saying is two people looking at the same Bible may draw two quite different conclusions from exactly the same text. And you get this most often with young Christians. It's very common to hear young Christians say things like, well, what does the Bible say? Or, the Bible is enough. Let's all stick to the Bible. But the thing you realise as you go on is that the Bible alone often will not achieve consensus. Exactly because of what I've said, the same text with a different hermeneutic will give a different interpretation. A totally different interpretation. Opposite, even. And the fact is that can be invisible to Christians for a really, really long time, especially if they stay in one church or move between similar churches. They often get the impression that there's only one interpretation for particular texts, and therefore all we need is the Bible. But when they finally wander into a different type of church, a different denomination, they suddenly discover that those other people also read the Bible. But they've come to quite different conclusions about what the text means. I want to show you from an actual example just how differently the same text can be interpreted. And I'm not trying to tell you you're wrong. I'm just trying to show you how differently something can be understood by different people. So I found a video on YouTube where a guy is talking about a text and he says it the way you say it. So let's together now watch his little video, and somehow using the editing software on my Mac, I am going to insert that recording into this video now.
Very important statements. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Now the question is, what is this generation? There are three basic options, and I want to lay these out before you. Option number one is this generation refers to those disciples in the first century who were hearing the words of Christ as He actually spoke. And if that is the case, then these things taking place is what happened in 70 A.D. in Jerusalem. Well, I ask you, after reading Mark 13, can you tell me that such catastrophic worldwide events took place 2,000 years ago in the first century? And the answer from me is an unequivocal no. It has not yet come to pass like that. Do you think that the gospel has gone to the entire world beginning in the first century? I mean, do you think that the skies, that the sun turned red and the moon refused to shine, and that the stars fell in the first century, and that there was this upheaval in the created order? No, this has not yet come to pass.
Okay, so this guy comes across as a pretty decent, genuine guy. He's doing Mark 13. Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And Jesus says it will happen in this generation. And this guy is good enough to lay out a couple of possibilities. Does it mean literally this generation, the people Jesus is talking to? And this guy thinks not. And the reason he thinks not is because the events described in Mark 13 haven't happened. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. What is immediately clear is that this guy is using a literal hermeneutic. He thinks it's saying the sun and moon will literally go dark. It's talking about the cosmological bodies up there in space. They will literally go dark. The stars are going to literally fall out of the sky. Where are they going to fall to? To Earth? Are they going to make little splashes as they land in the Atlantic Ocean? Is that what it's saying? I don't know where they're going to fall to, but they haven't fallen yet. That's what he's saying, yeah? Okay. Here's the thing though. Jesus said, this generation. That really sounds like the people he was talking to right then. And in another place he says, some of you standing here will see the Son of Man coming into his kingdom. And to the high priest he says, you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds. Kind of sounds like in their lifetime, right? Is it possible to understand these things as having happened in their lifetime? Perhaps yes, but what about them falling stars? So, for starters, Jesus is quoting Isaiah. That what he says there, that bit of text, is from Isaiah, where the theme is judgment. But you need to be careful with that, because judgment of who and when? Remember, that was John the Baptist's problem with Jesus. The judgment wasn't happening. Jesus wasn't doing it the way they expected. Not the way John expected. Not the way the disciples expected. Not the way the religious leaders expected. That was the whole problem, really, that they had with Jesus. He wasn't doing it the way they expected. Now, I think a major fault of people reading the Bible is simply not reading enough. So let's look at Mark 13, and this is how I do things. Place your left index finger on Mark 13, verse 24. Yes, get the Bible out, open the Bible, place your left index finger on Mark 13, verse 24, the verse we are interested in. Now move your index finger back over the text until you get to the beginning of the section or block. You can pause this and come back when you've done it. If in your moving backwards with your finger you get to Mark 10, you've gone too far back. So I would say the beginning of the block is Mark 11 verse 1, or perhaps Mark 11 verse 15. Take your pick. And when you found the start of your block, that is where you need to start reading from. Start reading from that point. Now, with the index finger on your right hand, place it on Mark 13 verse 24 and move forward in the text until you get to the end of the block, which in this case is the end of chapter 13. Okay? That's what you need to read. All of that. This everyday with Jesus stuff, where you read a couple of verses a day, is definitely going to steer you wrong every time. Yeah? So read all of that. Pause this, read it, and then come back. Okay? Okay. Let's go through it together. Mark 11, verse 15. They came to Jerusalem and entered the temple. The capital city, the temple was the heart of religion. That's where they are. First thing he does is drive out the moneylenders and vendors. Jesus thinks they shouldn't have been there. Verse 17. The response of the religious class, verse 18, they begin plotting to kill him. Jesus is not happy with the religious system, and the religious system is not happy with Jesus. Then they leave for the night. Peter notices the fig tree Jesus cursed. Maybe we should have read from a little bit before verse 15. But anyway, Jesus does not hate fig trees. This is not a horticultural thing. The fig tree is Israel. He expected fruit. There was no fruit, and he condemned it. It's a picture. Jesus curses the fig tree and it dies. Jesus is going to destroy this religion. Strike one. Okay? Jesus continues, anyone who says to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and does not doubt, but believes God, it will be granted him. Not any mountain, this mountain, where the law was given, Mount Sinai. Yeah? Again, just like the fig tree, this is talking about Israel. Strike two. Jesus comes to Jerusalem again. Next day, Jesus faces off with the religious leaders. We're in Mark 12 now. Jesus tells a parable against the religious leaders. In that parable, he finds fault with the religious leaders and says he's going to destroy them. Verse 9. That's strike three. Then there is a kind of face-off between Jesus and the religious leaders. And Jesus condemns the religious leaders again in verse 40. Okay, so then we have the end of Mark 12, the widow's mite, which your pastor reads every Sunday before he passes the bucket round and tells you this is about generosity, but it's not. Fitting in with a pattern of the entire block, this is a condemnation of the religious system. The poor widow put in everything she had to live on. It's not a commendation of the widow, it's a condemnation of the religion. If you are in any doubt, all of this is also in Matthew. We're in Mark, it's all in Matthew as well. I think it's actually clearer in Matthew, but the guy in the video is reading from Mark, so we're doing Mark, okay? Chapter 13, Jesus leaves the temple, and Jesus says, not one stone of this temple will be left on another. It will be entirely torn down. And the disciples say, please tell us about that. And Jesus answers the disciples and says a lot of stuff that's hard to understand. Now, it might be your Bible has headings. Please ignore those. There are no headings in the original. Those have been added to help you, except of course those headings themselves are derivatives of whatever interpretation that particular Bible translator themselves had, right? So just ignore the headings. Yeah. Okay, we've done a lot of reading. Why did we read all that? To get the context. To get the theme, the build-up within which our verses live, yeah? And the theme is Jesus versus the religious system. And Israel as a nation is predicated on that religious system. It's called Israel because the 12 tribes were the descendants of a man called Israel. Yeah? And Jesus is finding fault with it. Jesus is finding fault with it, and it is finding fault with Jesus. And this is what is going to get him crucified. Like it says, they were planning to kill him. Not only is Jesus finding fault with it, he has said 3 times that he is going to destroy it. The fig tree, the mountain, and finally, explicitly, not one stone will be left on top of another. So something is ending. Yeah? Israel is ending. This is the end of Israel. So now that we've established what is ending, let's look at how that thing began. This is where it starts. There was a man called Abraham. He had a son called Isaac, had a son called Jacob. Long story, Jacob got renamed Israel, and Israel had sons. Genesis 37. One son was called Joseph. Kid has a dream. Verse 9, I had a dream. The sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. 11 plus 1 is 12. That's your 12 tribes, symbolically. The sun, the moon, the stars. This is the beginning. Mark 13 is the ending. The sun will not give its light, nor the moon, the stars will fall. This is the end of Israel. Jesus said he was going to put an end to it, and he did, in that generation. And that's really the end of my example. You might wonder, well, what was the point of Israel? And the Bible tells us, if we use the pictures provided, Revelation 12, then a sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with, check it out, the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. She gave birth to a man-child who was taken up to God's throne. That's Jesus. And that really was the mission, the point of the nation of Israel. It existed as a context for the Messiah, for Jesus. Once that was done, there was no need for it anymore. That was its purpose. So coming back to what we were talking about, that guy from the video read a verse and believes it's talking about literal cosmological phenomena that will happen way in the future. But I'm saying it's already happened. Jesus was talking about the end of a religious system, that the temple will be destroyed. This temple, this generation, not in the future. And so you can see, to genuine, honest people looking at the same verse, came to quite different, really, in this case, opposite conclusions.